All right, so we're just getting ready to come up live on Style and Empowerment Chat with Laura and Friends with our fantastic, fabulous guest, uh, Aviad Arik Herman. So excited to get into some amazing and glamorous conversation and talk all about couture fashion design and costumes and theater and the arts and all things uplifting and fantastic.
Mhm.
Yep, we're good. And welcome back to this week's edition of Style and Empowerment Chat with Laura and Friends Radios. I thank all of our listeners who tune into us every week all around the world. So, as you know, last week I was covering all the shows at New York Fashion Week. I had the pleasure of covering the amazing event Haute and Holy, where I met this week's guest, super sensational couture and costume designer, artist, creative consultant, philanthropist, Aviad Arik Herman. So, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So I'm so excited. Well, first of all, Hot and Holy was such an amazing event, which was produced by Toby Rubenstein and Mana Contemporary Museum of Art. So, can you tell our listeners how you all became connected and just what really inspired you to be part of that fantastic event?
Absolutely. So first of all, I was really happy to meet you at the event, and I'm grateful for the invitation to be chatting with you here today. And so I acknowledge you and hello to all your and our listeners around the world today. I had the pleasure of meeting Toby Rubinstein already 5 years ago when I participated at another event she produced, one of the official opening events of New York Fashion Week 5 years ago. So our relationship started back then. She'd been following my design work toward the years, and this year, when they were preparing this fabulous endeavor of the Hot and Holy event, I was really, really excited to get the invitation to participate both as a speaker at that panel as well as present one of my designs to close the runway show. And so, yeah, it was a really wonderful experience for me. I'm really happy that I got a chance to visit New York during these exciting times. Um, yes.
And I think there was just a whole another energy this season at the shows because this is really, for many of us, the first time we've been doing Fashion Week and been able to safely do the shows since the COVID pandemic. And it just really, for me, just made me appreciate things even more. And it just even the simple things as being able to assemble and be around your peers and other creatives, it just had an extra specialness.
Uh, Absolutely, I agree with you. Yes, definitely. I mean, COVID has been tough for everybody all around the world, literally. So I think we are really privileged to be able to um, not only get back together, but also celebrate this incredible art form, if you may,
Mhm.
fashion.
And I think too, just celebrating survival, and so many brands have not been able to stay in business. So especially if you are a creative, having your brand still thriving now is just extra special. Now, the Hot and Holy show also touched on some very impactful topics. So it talked a lot about fashion and empowerment and the correlation and between culture and fashion, as well as the modest fashion movement. So you want to dive in your perspectives on some of those topics?
Sure. So indeed, the general theme was modest fashion, and I believe that it could be interpreted in multiple ways. Um, Perhaps the most obvious or literal one would be anything that covers the skin, right? To be modest, modestly dressed, and not expose your body or skin. But I believe there are other as or very important values or meanings for what modest fashion means, and especially um, during these times we live in. So
Right.
actually, during the conversation we had there with the distinguished designers at the panel, we really evolved on this topic. So first of all, it was important for me to just clear that I never came as a representative for modest fashion, uh, at least in the literal way. So my design work is very diverse, and I
Mhm.
in crossing over from stage costumes to haute couture, very elaborate, spectacular evening gowns. And so every project that I get to,
Spectacular is an understatement.
thank you very much. But every project that I get to work on has its own life, has its own needs, and so
Mhm.
with that being said, what I was able to bring to the table and have the conversation, having designed two quiet, significant gowns for two significant um, um, persons. One was the evening gown I recently had the honor to design for Miss Morocco at the recent 70th edition of the Miss Universe competition, which took place in Eilat, Israel, where I'm originally from. Israel, if any of you did not know that by now or couldn't tell by
Yeah.
my um, and the other gown is what is called the Jerusalem of Gold gown, which I have
Yeah.
great honor of designing for Her Excellency Culture Minister of Israel, Miri Regev, for the opening of the film festival in Cannes in the south of France in 2017. And so these two gowns, they indeed were spectacular, and they got a vast coverage in the world media, but they were actually both designed, taken into consideration modesty guidelines.
Mhm.
Um, and specific.
Now, for those who don't know, what are the specific guidelines of modesty in fashion?
Okay, so it's not really black or white. It really depends on, if from religious for religious people, for example, there will be different kind of rules, and
Mhm.
really varies. So it could be really anything. Different communities have their own beliefs and what they envision as modest or not.
Right.
So
It's like all forms of artistic medium. Many times there might be rules, but it's open to interpretation of the creator.
for sure.
But I think an interesting angle on this topic to bring in is that really, like you said, it's all in the perception of the creator or the person wearing it. But back in the 40s and 50s, they're talking about old Hollywood and the launch of Christian Dior when he made the day dress. And in that time period, women wore hats, they wore gloves. Your day dress was more buttoned up, a higher collar, a longer skirt hem, kind of like the fit and flare and princess cuts. And then the longer slim pencil skirt in the 50s. But in general, in women's fashion in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, at least 80% of it was what now is considered the modest fashion movement. because in that day, women, it was not acceptable to leave the house without gloves.
Mhm.
You wore stockings. You wore heels when you left. In old Hollywood, it was, you had the Marilyn Monroe showing a little bit more skin, but then you also had the Betty Davis, Joan Crawford, who were more covered up. Of course, Katharine Hepburn, who always wore suits and button-up blouses. So if we dive into our history and look a little deeper, a lot of American fashion actually at one stage was modest. Of course, in the 60s and 70s, where we had, quote, the sexual revolutions and all this, and now in the day of social media and the Kardashians and all this stuff, it's like, why wear clothes, right? And it's gone far over to the left side.
I think
But I,
necessarily in America, I think we can see that as a general social movement, and a cultural behavior worldwide.
Mhm,
And maybe, I mean, maybe that will be introducing us to a whole philosophical conversation. Um,
mhm,
when you're saying that America was more modest at the days, then it's important to distinguish what really modesty is. If we're talking about modesty
mhm,
covering your skin, then maybe that's modest. But if we
right.
think about modest consumption, I doubt how American that is. I mean,
Well, yes, yes, of course.
we encoded to consume more, and also to not really care where things are coming from and what are the
Mhm,
getting all these where's the source of these places. So
right.
where there
And what is the working conditions
so
of the people producing the fashion?
yes, when it's very common nowadays to just look for the cheap clothes that you can just throw after one or two times you use.
Mhm. What
Yeah,
they call fast fashion.
fast fashion has really tragic consequences on our lives, and we either choose to be blind to it or not. But I think that when we speak about modest fashion, to me, this is what comes first. With all the respect to covering your elbow or knee or whichever your belief guidelines are, but I think, and I said that also at the panel, that I feel like being a designer nowadays, being a new designer, if you may, comes with a whole lot of new responsibilities. It doesn't necessarily take just the talent and the affinity, and the ability to think of a nice dress or a nice pattern for new pants and just style fabulously whichever influencer on Instagram, but
Mhm,
responsible for where your sources and resources come from, how what kind of impact you have and you leave um, in the world.
I
Um,
think I think really the essence is designing and dressing with environmental responsibility.
yes, indeed. And so anything you had mentioned before, I mean, we have a beautiful history, and it will forever be uh, inspiration resource to continue and develop a lot of fashion out of it. And I believe it's very much also influenced with the cultural behavior. I mean,
Mhm,
relative, and it's really a matter of the context. I mean, showing and exposing your body, you know might for somebody be a way to celebrate your body and be confident with
right.
who you are, not necessarily be provocative. So
Exactly.
there is no one truth about these things.
Yes. It's like many things in life, there's a gray area. It's not black, it's not white.
Well, as a designer,
But
I'd rather say that it's a colorful area rather than gray.
Yes, yes.
Totally
But
fine.
I also think it too there is a line for me. I feel there's an overlap between, the modest fashion movement per se, and just dressing with elegance and class and respect for your body. My father used to always say, leave something for the imagination. You know and I think too, if you're in a scenario where basically almost everything is showing out and hanging out, people are focusing more on the skin and less than on the design and the fashion statement. So I think it's like anything, there's a time and a place for everything. It's finding balance. But also, to myself, I just feel when I'm walking about and I see people in very, like, barely anything. We're not at the beach, we're just walking. I'm like, I feel like, God, I'm intruding, like I'm seeing more than I want to see. Like, look, it's like that feeling when you accidentally walk in on someone in the bathroom, or you're at and you walk in and someone's changing. You're like, oh no, I'm sorry. Like I feel like I'm invading your privacy just looking at you. And I feel, to me, that's is too much. And I think it's an important message to send to our women and girls, that empowerment is important, but you don't necessarily have to completely show your whole body to be empowered. But picking up on your point too, sometimes people are showing different parts, like they've been working hard to lose weight or to get in shape, or what, and they're proud of themselves, like athletes or actresses training for a role. But with anything, there's a way to do it where it's still classy. And I think that's something, with some of the new generation of influencers, that there's a portion out there. It's like I feel that the class is missing in the execution.
Or maybe class is redefining itself. I mean,
Yes.
humble to conclude that
Yeah.
we are just
It,
yet another
yes.
planet during this lifetime, and we do what we do, and we see all these changes around. Um,
Yes.
what is private?
And
What is
and
privacy anyway? I mean,
yeah. And well, I think too that's something that we define ourselves. But also in this social media age where, devices track us, Facebook has voice tracking and all the algorithms and selling merchandising and all that stuff. You're very true. Like, is privacy even a real thing? Is that an illusion? Do we even have privacy anymore?
right.
We could go into lots of philosophical discussions on that. And now, of course, we're going to dive into all your costume designs and your fashion. But I was also really excited to learn that you are a former performer yourself,
Yeah,
a ballet dancer, which I think is just super amazing. So, can we dive a little bit into your background and life as a dancer?
definitely. Gladly, I would share that I actually discovered the passion for dance in a relatively older age. I was already in high school. I was 17 years old. I had other passions and hobbies as a teenager. But then I discovered the passion for dance and decided to commit myself to that. So I joined the professional ballet school in Israel. And in a relatively short time, I was able and I managed successfully to get to a pretty high technical level. And so, with that came the ambition to pursue a professional dance career, and even internationally. So, I really went on that mission. And gratefully, I mean, now I'm talking with you, having completed my performing career, but altogether I've danced for about 20 years, all over the world, mostly in Europe, in Sweden. I spent many years, but even here in the US and in New York, I was working with touring ballet companies and performed. I got to do through dancing some acting work, even doing some film and advertising, mostly in Europe, and of course also get to teach and choreograph a bit. So this really opened this door to abundance of creative endeavors, and I felt very fulfilled doing that. And to me also it was the natural gradual transition into my other identity of a designer, given that I actually started designing stage costumes and specifically for
Mhm.
um, having been in the dance world, and a lot of my colleagues that were also very talented, passionate choreographers would start to ask me to design their costumes for their new creations. And so it just rolled from one thing to another. And I found that a learning process that keeps uh, going. It's very interesting. For me it's also a little extraordinary journey. I am a self-taught designer. I have never attended a fashion design school, and I have never got any like formal education as a designer. So most of that knowledge
Wow.
comes from throwing
Wow.
other side of the river and then finding ways to get it. But in other words, really to commit to a lot of challenges and believe and trust in myself that I can do, and looking for the ways to fulfill them, working with teams all the time that are professional that I can learn from. um, so yeah, so altogether
Well,
thing.
well, before we go on to our next questions, I just want to pause and just acknowledge how amazing that is. First of all, most people study all through childhood to be a professional dancer, academies, and the fact that you were just able in a short amount of time become a professional ballet dancer in multiple companies is not only unusual, it's unprecedented and amazing. So you should pat yourself on the back for that. I mean, that's God saying, "This is your special gift, and this is your path." Because no one has just said, "Hey, I want to be a dancer. Look, I can plie, I can, do all this stuff. Look at me." So that is just beyond amazing and impressive. And also, having seen your designs in person, literally, like, it came down the runway and it took my breath away. The beading and it just all the sparkle and intricacy of the design. And I've seen so many of your other designs, which we're gonna, go into. You are just so amazingly talented, and to hear, it's just so inspirational and inspiring that you were able to teach yourself couture, and the level of artistry that you have is just amazing. Of course, we never do things alone, as you said. You learned under other teams, or we surround ourselves with people who are amazing. But that essence has to be there, right? And I'm just so inspired, and I hope our listeners take inspiration that if you have the passion inside you and you're going to commit to learning your craft and teaching yourself, that you can attain amazing heights, within your calling.
Thank you for that acknowledgement, and I feel like there is one there is, I would like to comment on that, and especially given what you just said about our listeners. I know that sometimes when you hear people, share such stories about their life, um, it might not feel like that you see yourself in that. I mean, it might be inspirational to a certain extent. But I just want to give another context to that, because yes, indeed, I have pursued basically two artistic creative careers. I was not in that position that I thought, okay, what am I going to do with my life? Let me look for a job that I'm going to, I don't know, make a lot of money and, uh, be a good doctor or a lawyer, or these things that are somehow encoded in the way we think that we should be living towards to. I was really fortunate to have a very supportive family, and from a very young age, when I started expressing myself through playing with Barbie dolls from the age of 2, through painting and drawing and doing a lot of fashion drawings throughout all my childhood. Um, that came also with a price. I mean,
Mm,
I was bullied for that. It was not cool to do. I'm a boy doing all these things that were referred to as girly. Um, but to me, it just felt a natural self-expression, and was just normal for me to do. I remember that as a kid, it's not that I necessarily envisioned myself being a designer one day in the future. It was just the most natural thing for me to do: draw and do fashion drawings and just fantasize and see what comes out of this on the paper. Um, so I think, if anything, uh, doing this is allowing myself throughout my life to despite all the obstacles and a lot of I mean, oftentimes I said I have been blessed with a supportive family, but sometimes people in my environment, in school, friends won't be as supportive. So
right.
like going with the flow was never really, I didn't feel like it's truthful to myself. And so, and
And
even
it takes strength and courage
this,
to be who you are inside.
and the persistence, I mean, and even today, it's not that everything is a fairy tale now. Those challenges keep showing, when you expect them, when you least expect them. It's just a part of the journey. But I I feel very privileged that I chose to commit to that, and that I'm still able to do that, which I love. I mean, I love human beings and I love clothes, and here is a great opportunity to combine these two loves. I have had two role models throughout my life. My mother and her mom, my grandmother. She was originally from Spain, and back in the day, she was a professional seamstress. And back in the days when they still lived in Spain, she would sew costumes for flamenco dancers. And when they immigrated to Israel, she had worked in a small textile factory to, you know, earn living and provide food for the little family. But it's not that she was just sewing. There was so much care and love and passion to every detail in everything she did, from decorating the house, everything being so neat, and very high sense of aesthetic and style and her makeup. And even if she would go grocery shopping, you know, she would dress up, not as in if she went to a gala, but she would wear nice pair of heels and a skirt, and she would put some makeup on, and she was very, very appropriate, um, styling herself. And this is something that as a very, very young kid, I grew up in that environment. And so I feel like that to me, was a great, great source of inspiration that
Mm.
is an integral element in the way I live my life, but specifically speaking at my work, paying attention to the smallest details. And I know, Laura, sometimes when I come to, especially when I'm doing costumes for stage productions, and especially stage productions because it's a different perspective, right? I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
stage and the audience is relatively far. And there are times when I am in the costume shops, with the teams that build the costumes, and there's sometimes there are details that we are talking about in the costumes that are important for me, and at times people tell me, oh, but nobody's gonna see that, or who's gonna see that. Well, I'm gonna see that, and I guess
Right.
that counts because as a little kid, I remember going to see all these performances, sitting in the front row and like scanning literally all the performers from head to toe, and having an opinion about what they wear, or if God forbid there was something that was really tragic, as I don't know, a Cinderella gown and a pair of sneakers underneath, because nobody is supposed to see it.
Thought
But
they'd see.
to me, it ruined the magic. So somehow,
I was just gonna say, so much about costume design, the music, the costumes, it helps your mind and your imagination escape to and transport to that place that the production wants you to go. And little details can break that vibe, and then your mind starts saying, oh, this, that, and then you're out of the play. Your mind's out of where you're supposed to go. So details do very much matter. And being a former dancer yourself, you do bring a unique perspective to a theater and ballet costume design, because you know the functionality of what these costumes need to be. So I often wondered, and then also too, so many like iconic, because there's a crossover where costumes can really be iconic and have instant recognizability with a role. Like think of the Nutcracker, Swan Lake, Carmen, which has been both an opera and a ballet. Um, think of that red dress and the glittery lace and the headdress. That's Carmen. You think of that white tutu and the feathers. Oh, yeah, that's Swan Lake, right? So the details really matter. But was something that I've often wondered, and I'm excited to dive in with you about, is when, as particularly with the female costumes, oftentimes they have like the bustiers and the corsets and stuff, and then they have to do these big leaps and spins, which takes a lot of breath control and the rib cage. And so, what are some of the things that you do in execution, and when you're designing for dancers in particular? In the construction that is different from other forms of design, so that way it gives the flexibility and movement, but then also the visual kind of construction that you're artistically looking for the viewer to see.
right. So thank you for that question. I guess that despite you saying dance in particular, it's still general enough, because even dance has a very broad um, styles, right? But
Hmm.
examples you mentioned, and if we are talking about classical ballet, then for sure there is the very specific designs that are, I mean, so, if you're commissioned to design costumes for a classical ballet, then it is also it's very much up to the choreographer's vision, how, like, what kind of interpretation this version would be. And with that being said, there is a lot of freedom with designing the costumes differently than what they used to be back in the days. And not just aesthetically, but also the way they are constructed. If we go a little bit more into those technical details, for sure, we also today have a lot of different textiles and materials that allow and make it a lot easier both for the dancer to wear, as well as the actual construction and building the garments, and even also in terms of the longevity, the wear and tear, they are stronger. There's a lot of different consequences with that. But in general, I can say that to me it's always exciting, and especially with designing costumes for dance. One is definitely my extensive dance experience, having danced in so many different roles, in so many different costumes, so really this fundamental understanding and feel of the garments, and understanding the um, how they work, how they should be working, complementing the movement, or not. It all derives from the artistic vision and concept. But it's really this, to me. I, in general, like you said before, costumes are so important because they are really the identity of the piece. Before the dancers start moving, before the actors even say a word, you see them and you see how they appear, how they are dressed, and that already establishes a cert and creates an idea, an image of
The mood.
for you as a spectator. And so there is a very, very significant impact, I believe. And the same goes also for the work that I've been doing at the Miss Universe competition for the past 10 years, where I've designed for a lot of different contestants from a lot of different countries, both evening gowns and national costumes. And the Miss Universe competition, all those young ladies compete for the crown, but at the same time they're competing for the same attention, and where
Mhm.
going on, how do you get one's attention? So
Yes, how do you stand out? Especially there's so many beautiful women, they're all
uh,
accomplished.
all come with amazing life stories, and they're all very ambitious and very successful and very talented, and powerful young ladies that are really committed to better their lives, but the lives of their communities, and become better versions of themselves. So
Right.
I feel that responsibility, or I see that responsibility as a designer in this specific case, not just to come up with a nice idea of yet another red gown, but that those costumes or these clothes are a display of something deeper, that they carry a message and they have a meaning. And so, with your compliment earlier about the gown you saw on the catwalk, and I appreciate, because it indeed took a lot of work to embroider all of that with a lot of glass and crystal beads and sequin and stones, and but there is always it always comes from a story, with a meaning, with a value that it comes to portray. And for that I'm really proud, because it seems to have been sorry, doing well at the contest. And even my designs were nominated 3 times at the Miss Universe competition, top 5 best. So that was something I was really proud of. And really, each year I kind of raise the bar and look for yet another original, creative way to interpret whether it is national symbols or honoring culture icons or reflecting on subjects that are relevant to the lives we live in. Um, like for example, 3 years ago, I've designed the national costume for Miss Great Britain, and
Yeah.
um, um, had to do with climate change and global warming, given that the UK is the first country that had a government plan to reduce um, um, gas emission to zero by 2050. So, this is something that really is urgent, and it is affecting the lives of all of us all over the world, which we only
Yes.
one. So, um, yeah, to me, this is really a fantastic, joyful platform to showcase those artistic concepts through a
And
very
celebrating world culture on such a big platform is also a beautiful and amazing thing. And each person's individuality, and you said like their journey and experiences, and I think well we're very much the eye on so many things, but so, that fashion doesn't have to be exclusive of purpose.
Mhm.
I think sometimes we get doctrinated by all the messages and social media and pop culture, but there is a market out there, and many of us who truly see fashion as not only extension of style and feeling good and empowerment, but also making a statement about your personal beliefs, the things that are important to you, the things like weighing in. And, there is really a place for social activism and consciousness within fashion, something I myself do a lot of. And I really love to see others doing that
That's
because there's so many different ways to get your views a point, and art is the best way to express. So, again, um, it's not exclusive and separate fashion, morality, social consciousness, and I applaud creators like yourself who seamlessly blend those together.
Thank you. I was
Mm.
just comment that you were talking about yourself, so I just wanted to acknowledge you for wearing this fabulous sequin cocktail dress for
Yes, I'll try and stand up a little bit. See,
great
yeah,
idea.
it got the bling.
Got it. Thanks for the blend.
It's noon and I got my bling on. Anybody who knows me knows that I don't need much of a reason
Great,
to be in sequins and glitter.
great,
It's my happy place.
great.
But I think it's, important to note, picking up on some of the things you've said, is that fashion is an individual thing, but style is how we take all these different elements and make it our own.
Yep,
So now you also, I mean, as you mentioned, you've designed costumes for so many different dance companies around the world, but you've also done work here in Philadelphia.
that is true. I have a very special affinity to Philadelphia. In the year 2011, I worked with choreographer named Annabelle Lopez Ochoa, who invited me to design her costumes for Ballet X. So that was my first and only time visiting Philadelphia, which I really loved. And I remember that it performed at the Wilma Theater. Is that what it's called?
Yes, yes, yep, the Wilma.
Yeah. So yes, Philadelphia has a very special place in my heart.
Right? So, for our listeners who don't know, the Wilma Theater is one of the many theaters on the Avenue of the Arts, which is basically like Philly's Broadway. So, you have the Wilma, you have the Kimmel Center, and many, many theaters where the Pennsylvania Opera, which is at the Academy of Music, and the ballet, they all perform in all that strip of theaters, here. And Philadelphia has a long-standing, stamp in the arts. So many amazing opera singers and ballet dancers have come through Philly. Of course, the Philadanco, one of my favorite ballet troupes, is based in Philly. And Philadanco is great because for the person who maybe looks at traditional ballet as a little kind of not approachable, Philadanco combines classical ballet and modern dance, and they're very known for their very bright, vibrant costumes. They do a lot of bold colors, and more kind of, I'd say, free flowing costumes than the traditional ballet, which is like the tutu and the bustier and then you also did work with the American Academy of Ballet too,
Yes, so American Academy of Ballet is an institution that I actually attended as a student in my previous dance life, and
right?
returned to as a faculty member teaching ballet as well as designing costumes. But for the past 3 years, I've been doing a lot of costume design in Israel,
Mhm.
at the National Theater of Israel, Habima, in Tel Aviv, designing a lot of their flagship productions, musicals like Mamma Mia on its 20th anniversary, and some original straight theater plays. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, but
And
altogether,
you also did the costumes for Barbie the musical.
that's true. That was a very meaningful thing for me, for any of our listeners that are still with us and heard me talk about Barbie dolls earlier in my life. When I was 30, I had a very exciting project and invitation to design costumes for an original musical, an all family musical that was produced by Mattel. Um, a very talented Israeli friend and colleague of mine that lives in LA, Kobe Rosenfeld, has been commissioned to both direct and choreograph the show, and he invited me to design the costumes. So for me, that was very meaningful, uh, closure, if you may, having
Yeah,
started
a full circle moment.
playing with a doll at the age of 2, and then at the age of 30 going back and designing more than 300 costumes for that musical, and
Wow.
singing, dancing, and very dazzling. And it premiered in Singapore and toured Asia Pacific for a year. So I was very grateful also to see the feedback and the critics coming from all the media channels around there.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yes,
And
thank.
oh my gosh. Now, was you when you're commissioned, like in a situation like the Mattel, do they have to sign off on and approve every costume? And like say with the different ballets where you design or theater productions, and you were saying you partner with the choreographer, which really makes sense because you have to know the kind of movements and things that they have to do. Is there going to be lots of jumps or lifts? All these things come into play. So do they sign off, have to approve your costumes? Like, what's that process like within the collaboration?
Definitely, that was a very ambitious project. And by the way, it was co produced with another production company based in Europe. So I was commissioned through them. And indeed, every costume in that show had to be approved by the board of Mattel. So not only for the choreographer and the director of the show, but also to be approved by the board. So that was also
That's a
very,
lot of steps.
that's a lot of steps, and that's a lot of costumes to approve, from the sketching through seeing the final result. Uh, it's just a part of the of this is the nature of such productions, and it is
Mhm.
what it is, and it's interesting, you know. I mean, we were talking earlier, or maybe in a different context, about the modesty guidelines, right? So this is just showing that with every client that you have, there is certain guidelines that you have to work with, whether it's
Mhm.
modesty or a policy, or beliefs, or limitations, or fantasy, or whatever it may be, and you just
Right.
get the job done in the best optimal way possible. So I mean, that musical was produced in 2013. I was very, very proud to have accomplished that, and um, I, yeah, looking back, I can definitely say I'm proud that I've done a pretty good job. I love.
Right? You're pretty fabulous. And that's the thing, like for our artists listening, is it is finding a balance between you're being hired to do commissioned to do a project. So you have to deliver what the client wants, but at the same point having your own stamp on it, your vision, but you do have to walk that balance of also giving the client what they envision in their head or what they feel comfortable in, or in this case like a company, what they feel is representation of their product.
Exactly, and that to me is a continuous learning process. We were talking about
Hmm.
being self-taught. I think these are the kind of things that one never learns in fashion education. Um, these are like the real life kind of things to
Yes. The
with the.
hard skills, as they say, there's things they can teach you in lecture and in book, but a lot of these things, like the interpersonal skills, the collaborative skills, and it is a real skill, the meetings, the consultations, the dealing with the client when they're frustrated or not like the draft. These are things sometimes you just have to learn through trial and error and refining yourself. And sometimes it's even about like maturity, taking your ego out of it. Going, what do you mean you don't like it? I think it's fabulous. And sometimes you have to say, okay, it's not about me. In this context, it's about them. So let me woosah, recalibrate, so I can go back to the drafting board. And that's something you really do have to learn more through hands-on.
That's right, definitely.
So and now you also one of the women I admire and look up to, Gail Godot, who of course is the latest incarnation of Wonder Woman. And just a pause on that. Okay, so one of my favorite, if we're going to talk about like empowerment and mixing fashion and the visual arts together. And the first Wonder Woman, when she first gets in touch with her powers and everything, and she comes rising from the horizon, and her hair is blowing, and her sword's up, and she's like, yes, I'm going to defend the island. And she's in touch with her Wonder Womanness for the first time. And it's just like, wow, like that image of her coming up and the hair blowing and she's in her armor. Well, it's just such a fantastic, like, rev you up. You're like, yeah, I can do that too, kind of moment, which also speaks to the power that fashion can have. So you did a very special tribute project to Gail Godot. I tell our listeners about that.
Definitely. So Gal Gadot is indeed one of the most amazing success story for an Israeli actress. It's very inspiring for us all back in Israel, and we're really proud. And in the year 2017, I paid tribute to the image of Gal Gadot through designing the national costume for Miss Israel, both at Miss Universe as well as Miss World contests. Together with my friend Karen Nathan Zonvait, we actually created this slogan saying that Israel is where real Wonder Women come from. And so therefore we pay tribute to Gal Gadot and all the Israeli Wonder Women out there. And so, inspired by the Wonder Woman costume, I designed a Zionist uh, uh, Wonder Woman costume, which the two ladies wore. And that was a very fun thing to do. But funnily, 2 weeks ago, Gal Gadot was in Israel on holidays with her family, and I saw her at the theater. She came to watch one of the shows I recently designed. It's called The Doctor. It's an amazing play written by the British Robert Icke, but that's obviously a translated, interpreted version into Hebrew, directed by Miri Lazar in Tel Aviv. So Gal Gadot came with her husband, Yaron Versano, to watch the show, and she seemed to be very supportive of it and posted on her social media. So that was a wonderful encouragement of her. And I definitely aspire and wish and dream to dress her someday too and create some spectacular gowns for her red carpet appearances.
Well, I'll put it out into the universe, and be some uh fashion angels can make that happen. I mean, your designs are just so I can't fully articulate. I mean, after our show, everybody go to Aviad's social media, and his work is just so amazing and flexes from just multiculturalism, the full on glam, to like industrial, artistic elements. It just will take your breath away. And of course, I have some of his pieces on my Instagram and on our show page on Facebook. You can see all the crystals and beads and movement. I just think you'll already have had so many amazing accomplishments getting placement at Cannes, and I just think your work should be on all the red carpets and Hollywood actresses. And I hope that to see that happen. And any way I can help and facilitate any of that, I just think you're such an amazing person, and a special person, and just, I can't say enough good things about you. And I just want everybody to come and support you. And then you also have a showroom in Israel. I took a peek at some of your designs. Oh my God, it made me faint. I'm like, yes.
Oh,
So
so much for these words. I mean, I'm really touched and moved. My deepest gratitude for these compliments and encouragement. I really don't take that for granted, and thank you for that support. Um, as I said before, I really love my work, and I'm grateful to be able to continue doing that. And I feel like I also follow this calling, and by helping whoever that is with their commitment to either look the best or like put on the most beautiful show, and I feel like I'm grateful to be of service for that. um so yeah, I am also praying for these fashion angels, like you said, and
yes, yes,
trust that what's meant to be for me will happen. And I
yes. Well, I see so many just amazing things in your future, and I just also want to relate to some of what you said earlier, relating and also trying to inspire our listeners and viewers. I've spoken about this many times throughout, my show. It takes life is a journey and sends us on ups and downs and turns. And sometimes we get just caught up in the pain of disappointment or how people are treating us, or in our mind, how you feel you should be treated versus how people actually are treating you, letting you down, and, feeling that you got something inside you, but you're not sure, well, okay, which way am I supposed to go? Well, what exactly is it? The path to that, takes time, and sometimes that path isn't always pleasant. But there is sunshine on the other side of that, and there's purpose in that too. Sometimes we're caught up in just all that stuff, and you can't see outside of that to say, look, there is amazing things. This is God teaching you, testing you, building your compassion, your understanding for others, your maturity, your texture. When I was younger, and, I was bullied. I mean, I could say I've been bullied throughout my life in different stages. And during that time where I felt different, or people didn't get me, or they were trying to get me to conform in some kind of way, and I turned to America's Next Top Model, the fashion shows on MTV, and all those things, and the movies and the arts. And I would imagine that was like the early seeds of my passion for fashion. And I'd see all these old Hollywood, actresses and all these movies. And I just look at this as like this beautiful, fanciful world. One of the things that I was bullied for when I was, a teenager, adolescent, was my voice. And people used to make fun of my tone and whatnot. And for a while there, like, that really got in my head. Like, I didn't even like to leave voice messages, outgoing messages on my phone. I hated reading in class because people would just say things. And, people find small things when basically you have integrity, and you're not about being in the fold, so they'll find something small to try and snuff your spirit and talk you out of feeling good about yourself. That It took me a long time to realize that. And people used to bully me, and it was like a thing. Like, I'd be like, oh, I don't want to I listen to my voice. I hated speech classes because I'm hearing the messages that people put in my head, not how I actually sound, and that it's okay. And now, I never would have thought that I would, down the road, be in radio, and red carpets and hosting and modeling and all these different things, and be able to give sponsorship to different things and stand behind the people and the foundations and things that mean something to me. So, like you, I self-taught. I had natural talents. I was given this opportunity, but I emulated in the beginning people who I admired in the world of radio and TV. And, I always watched the red carpet stuff, and oh, so amazing. Maybe one day in some way I'll be there. And now, years later, I host red carpets. I'm on red carpets, celebrating 6 years of my show. And whereas before people used to make me feel bad about my voice, now my voice reaches 1 million listeners around the world and brings people together. And I'm able to give a platform to amazing creatives like yourself to tell your story. And I say that, don't ever let people's small mindedness make you talk yourself out of what was meant for you, and your calling, and to celebrate the things that make you unique. Because on the other side, there could be like your amazing career. Uh, taking you to so many fantastic opportunities that you never thought initially were possible. But if you listen to that bully that said, "Oh, you're the oh, da, da, da," and all that stuff, you wouldn't have done all these amazing things. So, I say applause to listening to yourself and not the noise that other people try and put in your head to make you feel that you're not worthy of the things that you deserve.
Thank you for that, and also thank you for sharing your personal story and breakthrough. I acknowledge you for that, and it is indeed very inspiring. I think this is really the power in sharing, and to really see and get like what's behind, and what brought us to this point. And this is just the beginning, right? But this not
Yes,
there, and this is the very nature of human beings. So it's really important to always look for that alignment and for that inner truth and what really is important for us.
yes, for sure. And I think the more we talk, people's paths might be a little different. But if we actually take the time in this busy, hectic world and 15-second TikTok mind culture to actually talk, so many of us have more in common if we're open, have more in common than we have things, not in common.
That's true.
So, Aviad, where can our listeners and viewers find you on social media and all your amazing creations?
Well, you are warmly welcome to find me on Instagram with my full name, Aviad Arik Herman. I also have a Facebook page, and I have my online portfolio with my full name.com. Um, I am still working in a way that I design custom made exclusive pieces, but maybe in the near future, there will be other possibilities to access my fashion um, in other ways,
And your email is on your Instagram account as well.
or through Facebook or through my website. I'm always happy to connect with new people and collaborate with artists and theater directors and choreographers. And I love the stage. It's the most magical place, so I'm always excited to be a part of creative teams.
Yes.
Yes,
And I hope one day to wear one of your amazing creations.
I will.
Uh, I look forward to future collaborations and friendship and just supporting each other. And now you're currently in the States right now. For a period of time. Do you have any future shows or projects coming up in the near future?
Definitely, I'm gonna enjoy my US trip for a little longer here in New York and potentially the West Coast as well. I'm
Nice.
gonna be going back to Israel to start working on a couple of new stage productions, both theater and dance, as well as the upcoming Miss Universe competition, which was just announced that it's gonna take place in New Orleans on January 14th. So
Oh, wow.
I'll be back in the US very soon, and I can't wait to show you and the world what I'm preparing for that.
Fantastic. Well, maybe I'll have to put on my radar a trip to New Orleans to start the year.
I'll see you there.
Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us today and your inspirational journey and amazing talent. So again, follow Aviad on Instagram, Facebook. That's spelled Aviad Arik Herman. Of course, you can follow me on the Style and Empowerment Chat with Lauren Friends Facebook page, on Instagram at the Laura Mazurek. And I think just today's takeaway is don't let anyone set your boundaries. Be authentic to yourself. Be open to life and experiences and walk your own path and, cultivate your own magic.
Amen to that.
Have a fantastic rest of your day. We're going to dip into another music break. Thank you so much. And, best wishes for endless success.
Thank you so much. Same to you and to all our listeners. Be safe.